All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I was waiting to see everybody's joining. You're right at the hour. So let's get started. A little bit of introduction about myself. My name is Avesta Hojjati. I'm the head of R&D here at DigiCert. I've been with the company for the past 4 years. Previously, I was with Symantec, and before that, I was part of Yahoo's security team. And I have a sweet spot when it comes to security. I was quite young when I started my first startup, started when I was 17 years old. And basically, security has been what has been keeping me alive. And today we will talk about a very specific aspect of security, which is automation specifically. Before we get into the specifics of what we do here at DigiCert in regards to automation, I would like to take your attention to some of the specific areas that have been emerging in 2020 surrounding automation services. One of the big areas that we have seen a very big progress on is expansion of use of machine vision. Actually, this is not something new. Utilizing machine visions has been in place for the past 30 years. But what we have seen in the past decade or so is utilizing this technology, especially in the field of security. One example is to be able to identify the facials of an individual and match that with their IDs, either being a passport, driver's license, or any other form that has a government-issued property, as well as having the individual's picture on it. Recently, we have seen a number of different companies who are able to utilize machine vision to be able to actually take scans of this IDs and then match that with what is known as liveness detection, basically a short video or a short consecutive pictures of that individual and make sure that that individual is the same person on the ID. We also have seen automation in regards to malware classification. This is where your machine learning has been emerging for the past couple of years. Basically, the idea is that to collect as much as sample set of different type of malwares that are known and utilize those sample sets to train a machine learning algorithm to be able to actually identify unknown malwares. Again, this has been a very interesting area, and we have seen that. Matter of fact, here at DigiCert, we are working on the same problem, especially when it comes to our applications of code signing, because we have seen some malicious files who are actually being cryptographically signed, and we use that as a factor to actually flag the unknown type of malwares where they have been cryptographically signed for any reason. And the latter is obviously cognitive automation. This is learning from the behavior of the platform in order to prevent the known attacks. Again, this is not something new. For the past 10 years, actually, we have seen this. And basically what happens is you try to collect as much as data from your environment and make sure that that data by itself is going to be used to identify new type of attacks. This is where your deep neural networks or deep learning are making a dent in the industry. But specifically at DigiCert, when it comes to automation and TLS automation, matter of fact, we have been distributing our focus in 4 different areas. One is making automation to be accessible, which basically means if you have different type of web servers, we should be able to actually manage those. But then we realize that it's not only web servers, you have your load balancers, and then obviously in the future, you have your continuous integration and continuous delivery known as CI/CD that they require to actually manage the automation for TLS. Then reliability is quite important because especially if you discuss of compliance, automation plays a pretty big role. And this by itself means if there's a compliance issue that takes place, we should have a reliable platform that is able to automatically revoke the installed certificate and issue a new one, grab the new one, obviously, that has been issued via generating a new CSR or new key pairs, and then download that cert and install it on the platform, here being either the web servers or load balancers. The solution needs to be scalable. We identify that in the next generation of development cycles that we are seeing, you don't only have 1 web servers or 500 web servers, you actually will have thousands of new build processes. This is where you're seeing a new package, including your web servers, applications that are required, or whatever else that might be, will be included. And they're going to be developed by your developers, and they require to have a certificate in order to be in the production line. Therefore, scalability is quite important, and that means you need to have a very solid and high SLA, which allows you to actually scale horizontally if this is on-prem or scale from the cloud. where you're able to actually have that accessibility at all times. And then you need to actually be able to expand this automation process. ACME obviously came out around a decade ago, a little bit close to that, but ACME is not what everybody are going to use. Automatic certificate management environment is only able to support a number of different use cases. And what we have identified is some of our customers are utilizing different type of protocols, SCEP being one of those, for example, or they do have different requirements where ACME really is not able to actually satisfy their needs. I'm waiting for the next slide to load. Great. So if you're familiar with DigiCert's platform, you know that we have two products known as discovery and automation. Discovery basically means a method for us to be able to identify the environment, including the certificates that has been installed in a number of different network subcategories, and being able to classify those based on their algorithms, based on their expiration date, a number of different factors that we usually will classify each certificate with. What we identify is vast majority of the network is usually unseen. You usually will have individuals who either will bring their personal laptops to the workspace. Obviously, with COVID and everybody working from home, that has been a pretty big problem. Or you will have different type of network infrastructure teams that they do have different environments, and not all of those are being seen by the security team. Additionally, discovery without automation has less value, right? So if you have the visibility, that by itself is only 50% of the road, because you need to be able to actually automate the management of the certificates that you have actually discovered in your network. And finally, there is a lack of centralization for discovery and automation. Majority of the products that you're seeing out there are only doing discovery, in a sense that you have to switch your platform to a different platform in order to do an automation. And the solution that we have been working on for a while now is being able to expand the network reach. Regardless of a different networks that you may have, we should be able to still have visibility into those networks in a centralized location and be able to show you either the problems that you're going to face, or be able to actually take actions from one simple command. Combining discovery and automation as a single solution has always been an approach for us. And obviously, we are constantly working on improving that. In a sense that discovery and automation by itself needs to go back to back. You need to be able to monitor, discover, and then you should be able to automate the process. Developing additional discovery functionalities will usually evolve around nodes. And basically what that means is not only about certificate, it's actually about the algorithms that you have. But going beyond that is about the nodes that you do have these certificates, as well as the algorithms and the private keys, and whatever that is evolving the security of your PKI needs to be counted. So what we have been working on is to actually counting the nodes as the basis for our work, instead of counting the certificate, and to start building on top of that. Automation has the same categorization as well. So the problem is, deployment models are constantly changing. Many years ago, we had the models where you had to actually have the problem of installing certificates where ACME wasn't available. So in that case, a number of different companies came up with a number of different solutions. I remember back at Symantec, we had a number of different solutions that we worked on. DigiCert obviously had its own solutions. And here today, we are saying that ACME is a standard protocol for majority of these deployments. On the other hand, as I mentioned previously, ACME is not the only solution that we should have, right? There are a number of different protocols, and obviously there are a number of different environments that they require to have their own solutions. On-prem solutions are often a hard requirement. This is quite subjective, and we will discuss that in a bit. Depending on your environment, depending on your methodology of deploying applications, sometimes having an on-prem solution is a must. Either being the cost of the cloud, or being the fact that you would like to have more visibility into your applications, especially when they deal with security. There's a preference for having an on-prem solution to be able to automate your PKI. And finally, integration with internal CAs is always part of the automation. It's not always about the publicly trusted certificates. Often you will have your private CAs where you actually need to automate those as well. You could use these certificates for authentication, internal authentication, or you could use them for different type of applications that you have. Regardless of that, there is always a need for a centralized PKI where you are able to combine that private and public trust. Solution is developing a flexible workflows and multiple protocols, right? So if you have a flexible workflows, then you'll be able to actually add new protocols to the workflows. And each workflow we identified that is different per customers. One customer might only utilize one simple workflow, whereas the other enterprise customers could utilize multiple different workflows, and these workflows could constantly change depending on their needs and the products that they're releasing. And obviously, presence within customers' environment without compromising their security is always a factor when it comes to on-prem solutions. So we took all these inputs based on our interviews with customers, and we came up with an automation goal. We should be able to provide crypto agility for our customer base to facilitate rapid compliance response. Obviously, compliance plays a massive role in our products, and we identified that a driver for automation by itself could be only compliance, but there are a number of different factors. Going back to the basics is very simple. We need to discover, we need to automate, and we need to be able to constantly monitor and manage. And that has been a methodology for us whenever it comes to our automation services. And my colleagues later will actually describe some of those and show some of those demos, especially when it comes to discovery, automation, and management of these services. Let's look at the past, present, and the future of automation, especially when it comes to PKI. Many years ago, majority of customers will only utilize their web servers without any load balancers. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is mostly what customers actually utilized, and obviously some of them are still doing that, but some of them are going to move away from that. Your Apache Web Services, Nginx, or Microsoft Information Services, or IIS, were some of those examples that customers were utilizing, directly connecting them to the internet. And obviously that by itself had some problems. One was the scalability, other was security, and the train would have continued to a number of different problems. What we are seeing today in the present state is a massive utilizations of load balancers. Things such as F5, Amazon, Elastic Load Balancers, or ELBs, Citrix Netascaler, or A10s. These are usually what customers are using today. They realize that they could have their certificate installed on this load balancer. They could have many, many different web servers behind this load balancers. And obviously, the management of those will be much simpler. But what we are seeing some customers are going towards, it's this CI/CD model. If you do have your build process where you have to include your web server, your applications, why not including a certificate in that build process? Especially since customers are mostly using towards containerization, where you do have your Docker containers, and then they're utilizing things such as Kubernetes to orchestrate these containers. On the other hand, you do have your Salt Lake, Chef, Puppet, a number of different platforms where they're directly connected to the developers and allow them to create a build process and have their application in production in a matter of seconds. So looking again from past, moving to what we are seeing today with load balancers and the future of CI/CD, we took this even further, and we said, you're already supporting the web servers, we're already supporting load balancers, but how about we start supporting some of the CI/CD models where our customers are able to actually include certificates inside the build process and be able to manage those once they're in the production line. With that in mind, we also talked about the different type of deployment models, and one of them that I'm going to actually specifically talk about today is an on-premise deployment. This has always been a question for majority of customers, on-premise versus cloud-based. And obviously, each one of these have their own pros and cons, and this could be quite subjective to each customer. Majority of the time, your on-prem solutions are very high CapEx. You need to have those data centers. You need to make sure the SLAs are up. You need to make sure that the security factors and measurements are in place. And obviously, the only way that you're able to scale this is horizontally scalable, scaling those machines. Granted, with applications being mostly Dockerized inside a container, that scalability by itself could be solved, but at the same time, you still will have that problem where the bare metal machine needs to be added in order for you to have more capacity. And then the higher maintenance cost in comparison to cloud-based is always a problem. The cloud-based, on the other hand, usually will have a low CapEx. Again, this could be subjective, because if you're moving to cloud providers such as Azure or Amazon AWS, depending on your utilization, this cost could be different. On the other hand, they are highly scalable. If you have a new application that you need to push out, you can simply do that via requesting a new, let's call it EC2 based on Amazon AWS, and that by itself provides a new capabilities for you. And then the lower maintenance cost usually is included in the CapEx here, because the cost of actually having that service on the cloud is not really a separate cost from different categories that you have, is usually included in one invoice from that cloud provider. But one thing that is important here is the security factor. Obviously, the cloud providers are quite big on security, but that by itself is not always a solution for every customer. And that's where it comes down to having a solution that you're able to put on your own environment. And that's where we are introducing the automation gateway from DigiCert. It's quite simple what we are putting together. On the other hand, it solves a very sophisticated problem and a big problem. If you're familiar with Cert Central or DigiCert One platform, basically you have either utilized some of these functionalities, not on-prem, but you have seen the workflows that we are capable to actually put on-prem. The customer journey is simple. If you have a single sign-on, it will allow you to actually go to Cert Central or other services that we may have. Cert Central being on top here, obviously shows the flow that we are going through today. Once you have this Cert Central, this could be your customer environment. You could have your load balancers, your single nodes, or your build machine. Once you have those environments, you'll be able to actually download the automation gateway, which is a Dockerized solution. And it doesn't only act as a proxy, because proxy by itself only relies the data from one portion to the other portion without opening specific ports. But what it specifically does is allows you to actually push the solution completely on your prem, including the workflows. In this scenario, you do have your automation manager and discovery manager, both of them being Dockerized. So obviously, you're able to use your existing Kubernetes infrastructure. Once you do have this solution, the discovery manager will be able to actually look for your load balancers or build servers or regular web servers. Once you do that, it will send a signal to the automation manager saying, these are the systems that I have identified. They either have a certificate on or they don't. But regardless of that, we should be able to go ahead and manage those. And again, this is what happens with a massive integration that we have with F5 load balancers per se, Amazon ELB, or other web servers such as Apache, IBM HTTPD, and your IIS. There's another scenario where you're able to actually require to have a specific protocol. As I mentioned, those specific protocols could be for your load balancers, or it could be ACME. Regardless, the automation manager on-prem will be able to handle those. But then there's another scenario where you do have your network completely separated in a different environment. And for that, what we have done is looking at the personas on isolated subnetworks. In this scenario, we are able to deploy our sensors. If, again, you have utilized Cert Central today, you are familiar with the functionalities of sensors. In the same act, we are able to push the sensors, which right now we are working on Dockerizing that as well, in a different isolated subnetwork, and that will grab some visibility into the environment. Finally, if you do have access to this on-prem solution, you'll be able to enable a number of different managements. It could be your IoT manager or doc signing. The beauty of the solution is once you push this container in your environment, enabling different functionalities becomes much easier because you already have access to the platform. And after that, it's just a matter of getting the right license for your use cases. Looking at the TLS automation, these are the key capabilities that we have compared to some of the competitors out there. One of those is our managed ACME. We have worked on this for quite a bit. And what you realize is that just having a cert bot on a web server by itself is not enough. Not every single IT manager will spend the time to actually log into those devices and make sure that those devices are functioning properly. So what we have done is we have modified the cert bot to some extent, and we do have the capability of managing those cert bots remotely from a centralized console where you are able to actually issue a certificate remotely, revoke the certificate, or renew them without logging in back to your web servers. There's a self-managing infrastructure, obviously, that allows us to manage this infrastructure on the cloud, or we are able to actually manage it once the solution is on-prem. I'm not going to bore you out with most of this functionalities. If there's any specific questions, I'll be able to answer those on this call. Otherwise, please reach out to your account representatives, and they'll be more than happy to provide a demo or make sure that you do have access to all of these functionalities. With that in mind, we took a development strategy for all of our automation functionalities. Especially around the on-prem solution, we need to have a seamless functionality upgrades. Once you do have access to this platform on your environment, we'll be able to update those functionalities seamlessly. This could be new protocols that we need to add. This could be new workflows, or we just need to update and upgrade a security vulnerability that exists on that platform based on the different libraries that we have used. This by itself will increase the security models in comparison to what you have on the cloud. Usually on the cloud, you're able to use the application, but you don't have full visibility within the application. Where with our on-prem solution, you will have that full visibility within the application. And finally, we are looking to empower the managers and developers, especially when it comes around CI/CD. Those developers really don't need to care about managing the certificates, generating CSR, so forth and so on. On the other hand, some of them will actually require to have different type of certificates. They need to choose the certificate profile, so forth and so on. And with the on-prem solution, as well as the cloud-based solution, we are able to handle those requirements. Third-party integration is quite important for us. As I mentioned, we support a number of different load balancers. F5, Amazon AWS will be announced quite soon. The production of that and development has been done. We are just doing the final tests. In addition to that, we recognize that some customers especially require access and integration to HSMs, hardware security modulars, to on-prem solutions. And this is something that we are working on, and in the next few weeks, we will release it as well. Cloud providers is another example of this, which I mentioned, Amazon AWS. You could have this solution on-prem where you have your majority of your workflows, but then you might have a Amazon load balancer which resides on some of these cloud providers, here being Amazon. And we do have integration with that as well. CI/CD was another example that we discussed today, and we are quite big on that as we see the future of development and security to be heavily relied on CI/CD integration. And then there's value add-ons where we have the flexible workflow supports. As we mentioned, not every single customers have the same workflows, and we're required to change those workflows. Therefore, we recognize that this is an area that we need to focus on. We are quite user-oriented. We have developed this on-prem solution and majority of our automation solutions to be tailored to the needs of the customers, where they require to have a specific workflows. And we recognize that simplicity is quite important. At the same time, we need to increase the security level. And finally is a special focus on reporting. This is quite big for majority of IT admins. They want to know how many certificates has been used. They would like to know how many of those certificates are going to expire in the next 30, 45, or 90 days. And this is a special area for us that on the cloud solution and on the on-prem solution, we have focused on. With that in mind, thank you for your time. You can reach out to me at avesta@digicert.com, or you can contact us at digicert.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And there are a number of questions that has been asked in the question area, and I'm just going to take a stab out of those. First question is, you talked about the automation of TLS certificates. Can other type of digital certificates be automated as well? This is an area that we are working on specifically. As I mentioned, once you do have access to this on-prem solution, you'll be able to automate the certificates for your IoT devices. You'll be able to automate the certificates such as code signing, document signing, or SMIME. This is all being available based on deploying this platform on-prem and having those capabilities of management of an on-prem solution. Another question is, automation solutions can be quite expensive. How do you justify the cost against a solution of this type, or the opportunity versus cost? This is an interesting question because what we have seen in the past is the cost of a certificate being expired is usually way, way more than a cost of applying or deploying the automation solution. I think recently we saw Shopify, one of the certificates was down, and thousands of users weren't able to actually communicate and be able to either go through their musics or have access to their accounts. So the argument of cost versus opportunity here usually is you would rather pay the high price at the beginning. And to be frank, the price of automation by itself distributed between month and the cost of having an expired certificate is not even relevant, right? So you do have your IT admin who has to juggle around between this infrastructure to the other one just to make sure that all the certificates are up to date, or they have the Excel sheet that they have to track the certificates. It's just not a relevant or let's say a 2020 approach, where when you have automation, you're able to automatically issue a certificate whenever the expiration date achieves or gets closer to the expiration date, or whenever there's a compliance issue. Another question asks, what feedback have you received from businesses who have already deployed TLS automation, and how did it benefit them? Majority of the businesses who have deployed automation, they're usually asking, why they haven't done this in the past. And I understand that majority of enterprises, they have a very big and distributed environment. But majority of the customers who have deployed automation, they're quite excited because they can just log into their Search Central. They can see the expired certificates. They can see the automatically renewed certificates. They can see if there's a compliance problems that they need to go ahead and take care of that certificate. So I have talked to many customers in regards to automation, and every single customer that I have talked to has been excited about utilizing this. And they usually ask themselves why they haven't done this in the past. How do you see the future of automation going to security space, especially? Well, the future of automation, I usually utilize the example from what we see in Tesla, right? So you do have the self-driving car, which if you haven't had a chance to be in one, I totally encourage you to actually try it, because that's where the beauty of automation comes in. Being able to factor the pedestrians jumping in front of your car, being able to factor different cars speeding up or slowing down. All of those are the capability of automation. And taking the same example and applying that to security, we can see that human error has been always the problem. This example of that is phishing attacks. Majority of the time, phishing attacks are able to bypass some of the solutions where they're able to classify them. And that's because it's very hard to actually classify phishing attacks. But at the end of the day, human error is usually the one that is going to be blamed on. And the same scenario happens with TLS automation. On the other hand, TLS automation by itself is very straightforward. You do have a web server, you do have a load balancer, you're able to manage all of those. But on the other hand, once you do have a presence on customer's environment, and this is more of the futuristic thing for us that we haven't announced yet, you'll be able to actually add newer functionalities evolving around automation. Another question is, what type of challenges have you seen your customers have faced when deploying automation, and how did you overcome them? Well, one of the challenges is not really knowing their environment, right? As I mentioned, your environment could be massive. So usually what we suggest is to run a discovery on your environment to find out your different web servers, load balancers, your hosts and nodes. And once we do have identified those, we can go ahead and classify them based on the protocols that we are able to support. Usually, again, this is not a big problem. You need to start from just discovering that environment, and then you can start classifying them based on protocols or the needs that they have. One last question. A suggested automation for GKE would be to pack the DigiCert sensor agent in a Docker image and run it as a cron job resources and run it on a schedule. Not necessarily. So today we do have our sensor via OVA, so you can put it on a virtual machine. We do have it supported on Linux and Windows. And as I mentioned, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we will release the Dockerized version of the sensor. So once this Dockerized sensor has been out, if you have your Kubernetes, you can just go ahead and utilize the Kubernetes, which by itself does have a scheduler, so there is no need for a cron job. You'll be able to actually have the Kubernetes manage that Dockerized sensor, and once you do have that, if the sensor goes down, automatically will come back up. With that in mind, I think that's the last question that I had. Again, you can reach out to Avesta@digicert.com or contact us at digicert.com if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you so much.